This is Advanced Autonomy. I'm Luke Renner. My guest today is Jason Kenagy. He's recently joined the Cyngn team, focusing on strategic business development. Jason has decades of experience in tech and enterprise business, with hundreds of patents and dozens of product successes in the mobile computing space. Jason has spent a lot of time working from 2G to 5G and led the business's strategy in creating Qualcomm's 5G patent portfolio. His knowledge of 5G applies to connecting all types of devices and to increasing autonomous technologies. In this conversation, we'll discuss the intersection of 5G and autonomous vehicle deployments. Hi, Jason. Welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks, Luke. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'd like to start by asking you, what are the differences between 4G and 5G as it relates to industrial use cases?
Right. Yeah. So the main factor that people need to understand is all about access. Prior to 5G, cellular wireless networks were, for the most part, just not available to enterprises. And so that's a big function that has changed with 5G. There's now the capability for enterprises to get cellular technology. There's several things came into play to make this happen. The key word that I think people need to understand here for this access topic is a term called private networks. And private networks it's pretty descriptive of what it is. It's a implementation of cellular wireless technology for an enterprise or for any type of entity, let's call it to use. And entities can be things like schools, military bases, hospitals, things like that. But as it relates to enterprise, they're things like ports, factories, warehouses, those sorts of type things. And so it's been a long time coming. There's been this desire to have this. The cellular ecosystem has been very mobile network operator focused towards kind of consumer applications for previous Gs. But there's been this kind of, even in 4G, it started, the motion started going back a couple Gs, 3Gs into 4G to bring this capability for enterprises to use it. And through the development of the standards, it's finally here, essentially, with 5G through this concept of private networks.
That makes sense. So the use case for 5G is relatively clear for a consumer, right? Trying to get more data out of their mobile phone, faster downloads, faster streaming. What makes 5G attractive for these enterprises that you're talking about? Is it just faster data speeds, lower latency?
The keywords I'll say here are reliability, availability, and performance. And what I mean about reliability and availability, it's if you work within operations within an enterprise, you need extreme reliability, very high reliability and availability. 5 nines of availability, available 99.999% of the time you need your systems online. And again, back to kind of like, these features that existed in home networks and consumer consumer cellular and Wi-Fi networks, to some extent, it's not as important. For enterprise, it's critically important. And Wi-Fi, although it's made a lot of great improvements over the years that make it more available to things like office environments, things like that, it wasn't ever designed with the intent that cellular was designed for. And cellular, as I think folks know, it's used it's a very reliable technology. The White House uses cellular technology. Public safety, emergency services use cellular technology as well, right? So it is known in non-private networks, if you will, to have a very high quality of service and very high reliability. That's now available now through this private network concept with 5G for enterprise as well. So that reliability, that availability, that's a key kind of game changer here through, again, the implementation of private networks. And those performant things matter as well. You mentioned two of them. One of them was latency. Another one in the industry term is enhanced mobile broadband, more data, kind of right, more bandwidth. The third that is worth mentioning here in terms of this, the performance word that I referenced earlier, the scalability and there's something called the massive Internet of Things within the 5G and wireless industry. And that basically just means you can have dozens, hundreds, thousands of devices connect onto a 5G private network. And for large enterprises, even medium-sized enterprises that are pursuing autonomy, in some cases doubling autonomy month over month, having that ability to add dozens of devices, it's something you can't do on other wireless technologies. You can do it using Ethernet wires, right? But obviously you can't. There gets to be a point when you can't have any more wires, and wires literally get in the way, and maintaining all those wires. And so again, that reliability, that availability, and that performance, along with that reliability and availability, makes 5G and private networks kind of provide the ability to have wireless wires, like wireless Ethernet wires, essentially.
Got it. So it sounds like really 5G isn't coming to replace 4G as much as it's coming to replace Wi-Fi. It's
a debate. There's all kinds of opinions on this, within the various industries. And I don't know whether it would be. I mean, it's not going to replace Wi-Fi or Ethernet. It's not like a zero-sum game or a binary sort of type switch here, kind of, right? Wi-Fi existing on current spectrum that it's existed on, like 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz, that's not going anywhere. There's a lot of utility for cellular data offload, for people to be able to check their email on their smartphones, those sorts of type things. Very useful, kind of, right? And there's other uses for it as well. Ethernet is also very useful. I mean, frankly, the access points, whether they be Wi-Fi access points or 5G access points in a private network, those access points are connected by Ethernet, of course, right? So Ethernet's not going away as well, and there's cases in which it makes sense. But for the types of uses that enterprises, industrial grade enterprises need, cellular is an inherently superior and very sensical technology for them, right? So there's a bit of, these things can all coexist. They can all get along, right? And they have their very different purposes for machines that need, just for example, high-speed manufacturing, high-speed production, in which the front end of a manufacturing line is communicating with all points, down to the quality assurance, final steps of a manufacturing line. Those things all connected together, using AI as well to make adaptations to the production process. You need that sort of ultra low latency, and you need the reliability. There can't be dropouts.
I want to go back to something that you said a little earlier. So the wired internet connection is what connects to 5G. So does that imply that 5G only works in places where there's an internet connection?
No, actually, that's a great question, by the way. There's the ability to have, these things function in a standalone way. I'll go ahead and say, kind of like Cyngn as well, right? I mean, to get Cyngn autonomous systems can run entirely and run great entirely disconnected, right? And so, so with a 5G private network, there are some benefits to having connectivity back to a back end, if you will, right? For remote administration and things like that, kind of, right? But really, once you get the network set up, right? Once you get it provisioned locally, you can have all of the equipment be on premises, right? And in that point, at that point, it just runs as long as it has power, right? Like electricity, then it can run without any connection back to the internet or to a back end. That's completely feasible with 5G private networks.
Okay. So we've talked about the connectivity capabilities. We've talked about the security features. I'd like to ask you, like, if you're, an enterprise listening to the show right now, what are some signs that they may see in their business that they're ready for 5G or should explore 5G?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah. I feel like there's all kinds of analogies, enterprise world to the home world, that can be made that are maybe helpful in this case, right? And so folks have seen, people are pretty used to Amazon Echo devices, being added onto their network, right, in their home, and attaching light bulbs, and in some cases even door locks and things like that as well, right? And so So the genie's out of the bottle a little bit in this regard, on a individual kind of consumer level, right? And up until now, up until 5G, that really wasn't quite as safe and possible because, back to some of your previous questions, security, now, and as well as just the very first question here, access. So now access is becoming available through these private networks. It's secure. And these concepts in terms of like the value that you get by adding all these things onto your network, right? And allowing these things to be connected and wirelessly connected. Not to just oversimplify it and, oversimplify it and dumb it down too much, but just that concept applying to enterprises is a natural kind of organic realization that I think enterprises will have. Another factor that I'll say here is just all enterprises need to increase productivity and efficiency. They must constantly do that, right? And there are a certain amount of maybe cutting edge, maybe bleeding edge, but there's a bunch of enterprises that are pursuing autonomy, right? That are ahead of the pack, right? In some ways, right? And these, sometimes they're doing it privately, and not telling anybody about it, but there's enough out there as well that the genie's a bit out of the bottle on this one, that autonomy matters, right? And so if you want to increase autonomy, and you need your machines to connect to each other, or some level of connectivity, if not constant connectivity, even intermittent connectivity, and you want to double autonomy month over month, as I referred to before, you're gonna need a method to do that in a scalable way.
Reading between the lines here, it sort of sounds like that enterprise organizations will not be able to realize kind of the full vision of the fully connected Internet of Things warehouse or Internet of Things factory, fully automated, fully autonomous, without making an investment in connectivity solutions like 5G. Is that overstating it, or?
I don't think it is overstating it. I think there's great things that you can do today, right? Utilizing, digitally modernizing and utilizing, great, I'll say kind of like standalone, even unconnected implementations. Cyngn offers some great ones there, right? For example, right? But longer term, and when I say longer term, I mean a low number of years. I mean, you really do need to plan for this.
So I'd like to shift the conversation. I want to talk about how 5G is going to impact the deployment and development of autonomous vehicle technology. So, one of the things about Cyngn's AV tech is that they work at the edge, which is to say that companies don't necessarily need to be connected and online in order to deploy an autonomous vehicle. That being said, connectivity does mean that companies get access to data pipelines, and the system will automatically integrate new insights from our AI models. 5G represents the next generation of connectivity, as we've discussed. So I'm wondering, how are you imagining autonomous vehicle deployments will shift once 5G becomes more widely available?
The first I would just say would be more connectivity, even for discrete kind of like focused type tasks. More connectivity is better. And so in an environment in which an autonomous vehicle is operating, layouts change, buildings change, the insides of buildings change, meaning that new workers come online, racks and shelving moves to a particular area. And modifications to various processes, frankly, outside of the realm of an existing track for an autonomous vehicle change, right? And so having that kind of more regular connectivity and contact just simply brings you the massive value of being able to make updates and make adjustments more real time, essentially, right? To have these things happen, I'll say kind of like semi-automatically, kind of, right, as opposed to having to have the autonomous vehicle, be updated, nightly or relearn on itself in some downtime mode, right? They will be able to be updated I'll say, somewhat continuously, right? By having such connectivity, because change does happen. The workplace environment does happen, right? Both in terms of the physical layout of stuff, as well as processes kind of all around in that stuff. And by having that connectivity or constant connectivity, you'll be, that will just happen, and it's a huge deal. Just much more real time, if you will, right? And that's a big benefit when time matters, right? The second I'll say will be interaction, right? And whether it's autonomous vehicles interacting with each other, or whether it's autonomous vehicles interacting with other elements within the system. And that may be a robot arm picker or something, right? That itself has been updated, or its task that it's doing has been updated. And that can change the cadence or the approach of the autonomous vehicle that goes to have a pickup or drop off at that robot arm, at that stationary robot arm picker, for example, right? And so having connectivity amongst devices, again, it can be autonomous vehicles connectivity from kind of like a fleet orchestration standpoint, or it can be to many other things, such as, again, automated picking arms, or even just new pickup drop-off stations to humans as well, right? And so those are the two things, I think, kind of like real-time connectivity for real-time changes, and then an expansion of being able to work more efficiently by being able to orchestrate and connect with other devices for efficiency as well.
Yeah, it sounds like 5G is going to create a lot more opportunities for these assets to talk to one another and sort of coordinate their efforts system-wide. That's really
right.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, connectivity is really like no human wants to decrease their connections to other people generally. I mean, other than, your odd hermit or something perhaps, right? But it's pretty well known that once you know what you're doing, and once you're comfortable with an environment, when you make more connections in that environment, good things will do, more interactions will happen, more innovation, more invention, more positive outcomes will happen. I think that kind of applies to autonomy as well. Yes, Cyngn systems support great offline capabilities for specific tasks, but as you start to add that connectivity, the possibilities, still preserving the performance of that existing task, of course, but it allows more opportunities to develop as well, and that's the promise, and that's the future, and it's a pretty straightforward reality, and we're on a good track to achieve it.
Well, Jason, I really appreciate this. This has been a super interesting conversation. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks. My pleasure.